Hello, my dear friends. Today, I want to share with you a very special story. It is about a man who is often called the Father of America. His name is George Washington. He was the first president of the United States, but his story is not just about power. It is about courage, patience, sacrifice, and leadership. George Washington's life teaches us that even one person with strong character and vision can change the future of a whole nation. His journey from a young boy in Virginia to the leader of a new country is a story full of challenges, hard work, and hope. So, sit with me today as we explore his story step by step. And before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to English 7 Days for more inspiring stories that help you learn English while discovering the lives of great people. Now let's begin. George Washington was born on February 22, 1732, in Westmoreland County, Virginia. At that time, Virginia was one of the 13 colonies under British rule. His father's name was Augustine Washington, and his mother's name was Mary Ball Washington. George grew up in a farming family. His father owned land and worked with tobacco. Life in the colonies was not easy. Families had to work very hard to grow crops, take care of the land, and survive. When George was only 11 years old, his father died. This was very hard for young George. He lost not only a parent, but also the security of childhood. After his father's death, George had to grow up quickly. He became responsible, serious, and independent at a very young age. Even though he did not go to university, George learned important skills. He studied mathematics, surveying, and farming. He loved the land, and from a young age, he felt connected to nature and agriculture. This knowledge later helped him become not only a soldier and leader, but also a successful farmer. As a teenager, George trained to become a land surveyor. Surveying was the science of measuring land, drawing maps, and marking boundaries. At only 16 years old, George was already working in the forests and mountains of Virginia. This job was not easy. He walked for miles in rough land, slept outdoors, and carried only basic tools. But the work made him strong, disciplined, and practical. It also gave him a deep knowledge of the land that he would later defend as a soldier. When George was 17, he became the official surveyor of Culpeper County in Virginia. This was a big responsibility for someone so young. People respected him because he worked honestly and carefully. When George was in his early 20s, the colonies faced great danger. The French and the British were fighting for control of North America. This was called the French and Indian War. George wanted to serve his colony, so he joined the Virginia militia. He showed courage and leadership even though he was very young. At 22, he was sent to deliver a message to the French, telling them to leave British territory. This mission was dangerous. George had to travel through forests full of snow, rivers, and hostile groups. He almost lost his life, but he survived. In battle, George showed bravery. During one fight, bullets passed through his coat and horses were shot under him, but he was never hit. People began to believe that George was protected by God for a greater purpose. Even though the war was difficult, George learned many lessons. He learned discipline, leadership, and how to work with men. He also learned how hard war could be and how important strong leadership was. After the war, George returned to Virginia. In 1759, he married a widow named Martha Custis. Martha was a kind and wealthy woman with 2 children from her first marriage. George and Martha built a happy home together at Mount Vernon, George's plantation. George loved farming. He grew wheat, corn, and other crops. He experimented with new farming methods and worked hard to make Mount Vernon successful. Though he was often busy with public service, he always thought of himself as a farmer. At Mount Vernon, George also showed his sense of responsibility. He managed workers, cared for the land, and provided for his family. His home became a place of hospitality where many visitors came. The call to revolution. In the 1760s and 1770s, tension grew between the American colonies and Britain. The British government began to tax the colonies heavily without giving them a voice in Parliament. The colonists believed this was unfair. They said, "No taxation without representation." George Washington was deeply troubled by this. He loved Britain's traditions, but he also loved liberty. He believed the colonies should be free to govern themselves. As the conflict grew, Washington joined meetings with other colonial leaders. He became a strong voice for independence. He did not speak loudly or with fiery words, but people trusted his wisdom, honesty, and calm leadership. The Commander-in-Chief. In 1775, the Revolutionary War began. The colonies needed a leader for their army. Many leaders looked to George Washington. He was experienced, disciplined, and respected. The Continental Congress chose him as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. George accepted with humility. He did not ask for money or rewards. He only wanted to serve his country. Leading the army was extremely difficult. The soldiers were often hungry, cold, and without shoes. Many wanted to go home. The British Army was stronger, richer, and better trained, but Washington never gave up. One of the darkest times was the winter at Valley Forge in 1777 to 1778. The soldiers suffered terribly in the freezing cold. Many had no food or warm clothes, but Washington stayed with them. He encouraged them, walked among them, and shared their pain. His strength gave them hope. In 1781, with the help of French allies, Washington's army defeated the British at Yorktown. This victory ended the war. The United States had won independence. The first president. After the war, many people wanted George Washington to become king, but Washington refused. He believed in freedom, not kingship. He wanted the new nation to have a president chosen by the people. In 1789, George Washington was unanimously elected the first president of the United States. This was a historic moment. The people trusted him because he was honest, strong, and unselfish. As president, Washington worked to bring unity. The nation was young and fragile. He built the government, set up laws, and worked with Congress. He also chose wise leaders for his cabinet. Washington believed in setting a good example. He served 2 terms as president, from 1789 to 1797. After that, he stepped down. This showed that leaders should not hold power forever. It set an important tradition for the future. What made George Washington so special? He was honest. People trusted his word. He was disciplined. He worked hard, even when things were hard. He was humble. He never wanted power for himself. He was brave. He faced battles and danger without fear. He was wise. He thought before he acted. These qualities made him the father of America. He was not perfect, but he gave his life to serve his people. The final years. After leaving the presidency, Washington returned to Mount Vernon. He enjoyed farming, walking on his land, and being with Martha. Visitors came to see him, but he lived simply. In December 1799, Washington became sick after riding in cold rain. Within 2 days, he died peacefully at his home. The nation mourned deeply. People everywhere cried for the man who had given them freedom. He was buried at Mount Vernon, where his home still stands as a place of memory and respect. My friends, this was the story of George Washington, the man who became the father of America. His journey from a young boy in Virginia to the leader of a free nation teaches us that true greatness comes from service, humility, and strength of character. He showed us that leadership is not about power, but about responsibility. It is not about taking, but about giving. Even today, more than 200 years later, the example of George Washington continues to inspire people around the world.